Good morning. Thank you so much for coming out on this cloudy day. I'm Senator Erin May Quaid. I represent Senate District 56, which is Apple Valley, Rosemount, and a tiny portion of Eagan. We are here today with one simple message. We will fight to protect Minnesotans from the chaos, corruption, and destruction from the Trump administration and federal Republicans. And that means preserving access to health care, education, and other basic services that Minnesotans rely on. In a normal world, the Minnesota legislature is well equipped to build a budget based on the needs of Minnesotans in any kind of economic situation. But never before has any legislature in any time had to build a budget while the federal government actively sabotages that budget. Trump's cuts are designed to grind down our schools, our infrastructure, our hospitals, our basic services and programs, so we will become more isolated, more fearful, and more divided. Even the programs that have always been held most sacred, untouchable, Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security are at risk. We cannot meet this moment with business as usual. We really cannot. And we cannot accept the false trade-offs between education and healthcare, between public safety and the environment, between disability services and roads and bridges. We cannot be choosing which of our essential public services we're going to get rid of. We should be protecting these services for Minnesotans so that they can depend on what they need to live, grow, and thrive in our state. We need to end the special interest tax breaks and the tax breaks for those who have not been paying their fair share. In a moment, we will hear more about the options that we have, but I'll end with this. We live in the wealthiest nation in the world. And in the last several years, things have been very, very good for the extremely wealthy, while working class Minnesotans have been squeezed harder than ever. This is not the time to pull the rug out from underneath them, reducing school funding, special education services, nutrition funding, and leaving our communities vulnerable to illness, to environmental degradation, to harm. Budgets are moral documents. When Republicans say we can no longer afford cancer research or disability services or universal school meals, I'm here to say we can no longer afford to exempt those who have the most from paying their fair share. We can no longer afford these special interest tax breaks. And now to talk about our options, I want to introduce Representative Esther Agbaje.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Esther Agbaje, and I represent House District 59B, which is downtown and North Minneapolis. So in Minnesota, we have done our best to increase investments in housing, education, healthcare, and more to ensure that Minnesota is the place where people can thrive. But since this president took office, we have been facing attack after attack to the needs of working people and their families. As legislators and as Minnesotans, we must stand up and fight back to protect what we have in Minnesota with all the tools that we have available to us. So plain and simple, we have to talk about revenue. Despite the rhetoric of high taxes that permeate our society, our country overall is the lowest taxed and lowest spending wealthy nation in the world. And this means that our inability to provide for our nation's basic needs does trickle down to Minnesotans. It makes it hard to keep food on the table and a roof over your head. And since the federal government began its random and rampant elimination of essential programs and services like housing and energy costs, health and food safety, we understand that we are living in a new reality. The way we have done things in the past is not going to get us through this turmoil. We need to be bold and courageous. And part of the hard choices in front of us isn't only about how we will reduce costs that seem to somehow only affect those most marginal in our society, but rather figuring out how to make sure that all of us are contributing to a state and a society that is worth living in. So this session, there have been some bills that have been introduced that give us those options. Senator McEwen has a fifth-tier tax bill that could raise as much as $2.5 billion by adjusting combined and federal top tax rates to the level they were before Trump's first set of tax cuts for the wealthy. We should also consider having a corporate rate match that could raise another $1.7 billion. We should also look at various tax exemptions, some of which we can close to begin to increase revenue. And these include some of the ones in Senator May Quaid's bill to end tax breaks for a second home, stadium suites, and other luxury goods. And earlier, our Senate colleagues actually discussed implementing a social media tax and eliminating tax exemptions for data centers. This is not to say that we can just tax our way out of what the federal government has in store for us, But just as we need to look carefully at decreasing outdated or ineffective spending, we must also consider how we can raise revenue in areas that help us weather this incoming storm. And in fact, that is what many of my own constituents have been asking us to do, to look at ways to raise revenue from those corporations and wealthier people who can contribute more to our shared society. At the end of the day, our job is to protect Minnesotans, especially those for whom government, whether at the state or federal level, has not been a trusted partner. It is our duty to show that government can and should work for everyone, especially our workers, our families, and everyday Minnesotans just trying to get by. And here to speak to more of our foundational needs is Olivia.
Good morning. My name is Olivia Dillon, and on April 1st, my world was turned upside down when I was laid off from my epidemiologist position at the Minnesota Department of Health because of President Trump's unconstitutional attacks on public health funding. I worked at MDH for 2.5 years in various roles, including the unexplained deaths from critical illnesses programs, viral and bacterial respiratory response surveillance, and health monitoring for people who have had contact with avian influenza or bird flu. I was the one reaching out to the farm owners and their employees after confirming avian flu exposure and coordinating their influenza testing. I was the point of contact at MDH for medical examiners when they were investigating deaths that appeared to be of an infectious cause. I saw daily how our work impacted all Minnesotans. I'm here today to talk about a public health emergency. The layoff of hundreds of employees from MDH, many of them represented by my now former union, the Minnesota Association of Professional Employees, or MAPE. MAPE members at MDH spend their careers preventing harm before it happens. Now our expertise is being discarded at a time when disease threats from measles to avian flu are rising nationally. These staff cuts will impede the state's ability to prevent and contain outbreaks, significantly reduce support for nursing home patients, delay lab results and patient care, reduce funding for tribal public health, and so much more. Like me, my colleagues who were laid off were experts in their field. Minnesotans now face serious risks to the health and well-being of our communities. If Medicaid is also cut, the impact of health will be irreversible. I'd argue, however, that we are already in a place where the impact is irreversible. When you combine these losses at the state level with those at CDC and FDA, we are no longer able to investigate the outbreaks to this same level as we did before. Legislators have spent a lot of time these past couple of weeks talking about current and potential federal cuts. Yet legislative funding proposals are failing to meet the challenges we are facing in the state's budget. We must do more and be far bolder in our revenue asks to fix the problems we are experiencing now and to prepare for impacts from the federal government in the future. One of MAPE's slogans is "The state works because we do." The same is true of all workers and communities represented here today and hundreds of thousands of more across the state. Behind me are some of my AFSCME union siblings from Minitex, which many of you probably haven't heard of. Minitex is a public service that connects libraries, museums, and other informational databases across the state, enabling interlibrary loans and providing valuable training among other resources. Minitex is a pillar of preservation of human knowledge in Minnesota, and unsurprisingly, President Trump is attacking its federal funding too. We're here today to advocate for these often unseen but critically essential programs that protect and expand public well-being, and we will keep fighting to preserve them. I want to thank all the elected officials who are here today pledging to fight with us. We are strongest together, and I hope each of you keep the fire in your soul and under your feet to stop these attacks on public services. The health of Minnesotans' bodies and minds depend on it. Thank you. Sean?
Good morning. My name is Sean Layden, S-H-A-U-N-L-A-D-E-N. And I work with over 10,000 education employees who work from Pequot Lakes down to Rochester, Minnesota as hourly school employees with the Service Employees International Union Local 284. We're education workers who work with early childhood all the way up into higher education. Our members pick up Minnesotans' children to go to school on the bus. They prepare and serve breakfast. They support literacy and numeracy in classrooms. And then after school, they coach. And then when everyone goes home, our members come to work and clean our buildings and make sure that they're clean for class in the morning. Our members work to make schools happen. But for 20 years, Minnesota has underfunded our schools. And it's our students and our lowest paid hourly school workers who have paid the price. In 2023, we're looking at a bill to raise wages for our members. And what we found out was that the average hourly school worker in Minnesota makes less than $17 an hour in 2023. We have a staffing, a turnover, and vacancy crisis, not only in our licensed teacher group, but across all of our school employee groups. And as a former special education assistant in the Minneapolis Public Schools, I know what that means. It means when special education assistants aren't fully staffed, our students get less services. Those employees who continue to work twice as hard to try and provide the same level. And that means burnout is higher, right? We cannot keep putting more and more pressure on the system. So here's what we're here to talk about. The impossible choices that Minnesotans make every day. Our members who are food service workers in Shakopee don't want to see their property taxes go up, nor do our custodians in Pequot Lakes to fund under-resourced schools. But if this legislature can't find its way to raise revenue, that's what Minnesota communities all across this state are going to be forced to ask themselves to do. More with less, from the people who can least afford it. And we've already heard that Minnesota is a prosperous state. We have an opportunity to do something about this. When the federal government cuts Medicaid, cuts the Farm Bill, and cuts tax rates for millionaires and billionaires, Minnesota's leaders are going to have to ask themselves, which side are we on? Are we on the side of our students and their families who are struggling to get by, while those on Lake Minnetonka and Lake of the Isles have never done better? So this question that we have to answer, we're going to get to here, but I just want to raise up the fact that we have hourly school workers who have been doing more with less for decades, and it's time to stop balancing the budget on their backs and our most vulnerable students. So I want to introduce Senator Clark, who's going to speak a little bit more. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Doran Clark, D-O-R-O-N Clark. I'm State Senator Doran Clark, representing parts of Minneapolis, specifically Cedar Riverside, Northeast, Southeast, and the University of Minnesota neighborhoods. Minnesota has always had a keen promise of how we stand for and invest in each other. I'm a product of that. I grew up on a farm in Southeast Minnesota, and at 9, my dad died. We had systems of neighbors and systems of government support that allowed me to get food at school, to go to college, get loans and grants to afford school, and we need to maintain that promise that is Minnesota. We are a state that provides nation-leading benefits to single mothers, paid leave for our to care for our children, and we know that public education is the engine that drives the business miracle that is Minnesota. But we are, as you're hearing, facing cuts. We're facing cuts and surprises from the federal government. Whether it's, well, let's do a tariff today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe again today. It's undermining our small businesses, it's harming our farmers, it's harming our laborers, and it's making it difficult to plan for the future. But Minnesota is the promise. Minnesota is a promise that we stand together, that we invest in each other. Now, Trump and his Republican allies want us to believe that we need to choose. We need to choose between the rich and the powerful and providing for our neighbors. And they're working more tirelessly than ever to find tax cuts so they can squeeze our neighbors and hospitals and local governments even more. But we can't let their fantasy of an oligarchy become a reality. It's going to leave us poorer, sicker, and less prepared for a rapidly changing climate and society. That's why we're here, why I'm here, to reject this false scarcity. We can see beyond the narrow choices that they are presenting us. We live in Minnesota. We live in Minnesota, one of the wealthiest states in the wealthiest country in the world. We can do more, and we will do more for all of our neighbors.
Yeah. Good morning. I am Representative Emma Greenman. I am a representative from South Minneapolis. I'm a voting rights lawyer, and the reason we are all here today is because in the next month we have a lot of choices in front of us, and I think you heard a lot about the choices. And what we have as a country and as a state is a question of choice, because right now we see Trump and Musk and MAGA in Congress trying to steal billions of dollars, trillions of dollars from the vast majority of Americans in order to reward their billionaire benefactors with cuts, with private government contracts, and frankly, with control. These corrupt and cruel cuts strike at the very heart of democracy. They're not just about people not being able to eat, not being able to get their health care. They're also about who decides what is best for our communities. Representative government is the way we operationalize democracy. Self-governance, government by, for, and of the people. And so when we see attacks on policies, on programs that generations, in some cases centuries, of Americans have built and relied on, programs that ensure hundreds of millions of Americans put food on the table, go to the doctor when they're sick, get an education when they're young, get support if they have disabilities, and have economic security when they get older. When we see that, we have to ask why. They are attempting, that this is Trump, Musk, Doge, Republicans in Congress are attempting to dismantle our government, to sell it for parts to the billionaire benefactors who are doing nothing but dismantling self-governance. That's what's at stake here. And it's not a mistake that this hostile government takeover is coming at the expense of our programs, our agencies, and it is being accompanied by efforts to silence free speech, to punish opposition, and to strip fundamental due process away without regard for the rule of law or the laws of the United States. But here in Minnesota, we are not powerless. We cannot stop much of the corruption, cruelty, and chaos of the Trump regime, at least not alone. But it is our obligation in this body to protect communities and safeguard democratic self-governance here in Minnesota. And that starts by ensuring that we have the resources and the courage to stand up for Minnesotans and to protect our communities. And it's not just the job of these legislators in front of you or the DFLers, it is all of our jobs to protect Minnesotans, all 134 House members and 67 senators, the governor, and everyone. So what does that mean? We have all sat through committees, and you probably have too, where we have tried to bring up what the last 100 days have meant for our budgets. Whether we talk about tariffs, whether we talk about layoffs, whether we talk about cuts to Medicaid, whether we're talking about cuts to veterans, the 80,000 veteran VA workers, and what we get back is smirks from our Republican colleagues, snickers, they roll their eyes. Who knows what tomorrow will bring, seems to be the consensus. But our Minnesota communities cannot rely on that. They need us to stand up. They need us to say, we have plenty of options. You heard plenty of options. We need to do something to protect our Minnesotans, to protect our communities, and to ensure that we are protecting self-governance and our democracy for the future to come. So we are here, all of us are here with our communities behind us saying, here in Minnesota, we're going to ensure that we are protecting Minnesotans, that we are standing up and fighting, and we are asking all of our colleagues in the legislature and in government in Minnesota to do the same. Thank you, and I think I get to open it up for questions. Any questions?
Quixotic right now? I mean, aren't you tilting at windmills? Your Republican colleagues are not going to allow you to raise taxes anywhere at this point, and they do have that power at this point.
So first of all, I think the question of what's happened in the last 100 days makes, I think when we talk about what is tilting at windmills, it is the idea of letting hundreds of thousands of Minnesotans not have access to food. It is the idea of having millions of Minnesotans potentially cut off from the supports that they need. We have been asking and talking about, and what they don't say is no. Please ask our Republican colleagues what they will cut, who they will cut. Is it veterans' homes? Is that what they're going to cut? Is it kids in our schools? Is it literacy programs? And so we have a lot of time left where we're negotiating this, but I think that first we got to get serious about what we're looking at and the budget holes, and then we'll have that conversation. But please ask, because there's a lot of stuff happening behind closed doors.
I mean, that's one big cut that they
Ask them how much that is. We're talking about $3 billion of Medicaid cuts from the federal government. 14 of them signed a letter, just 14 of them, the day that that was out there, and that's all we've seen. So we are talking about giant programs, healthcare. I mean, and there are people here who could speak more eloquently than me about this. Thank you.
So just to bring everybody up to speed, Republicans had a press conference a couple days ago where they stood at that podium in the press conference room and said that by cutting the Minnesota Care program for undocumented immigrants, we would save up to $600 million over the next 4 years. And that is an absolute lie. They stood here and they lied to the people of Minnesota. They said that the program so far has cost $200 million, and that it is a $7,000 per person free health insurance program. Those are all lies. So they either do not understand how we pay for health care in the state of Minnesota, or they willfully lied to you, because it is a fee-for-service program, and so far that program has cost $3.4 million. $3.4 million. That is not going to fix anything. What it is going to fix is giving people health care. And when people have health care, they don't show up in the emergency department. They go to the clinic, they get preventative care. Hospitals right now are paying $460 million in charity care for all Minnesotans because of the lack of access to health care. That money will keep open maternity wards and mental health beds, psychiatric beds. It'll keep hospitals open. It'll keep doctors at the bedsides and nurses at the bedside. And instead, Republicans are telling you that if we take away people's health care, that's going to fix the problem. Those are absolute lies, and it was egregious what they said. They are taking our crumbling healthcare system and they're blaming it on immigrants.
That's right. To the question of tax increases, last night after the State of the State address, Republicans had their reaction, their response. The one thing that Speaker Damon said was a non-starter for House Republicans is tax increases. She said no new tax increases at all. You know, is there a way forward to end special interest taxes and whatnot with that dynamic in the House right now?
Well, maybe I should let one of my House colleagues speak about this, but I really want to put a fine point on what was said then. The tax breaks that we are talking about right now, $230 million a biennium for Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg, Meta, Amazon for their data centers. To mine our data, to poison our water, to suck up all our energy, to make AI porn of kids, and crypto. They want to continue those tax breaks. We have tax breaks for VIP preferred seating in athletic stadiums. They want to continue those tax breaks. We have tax breaks for gold bullion and for airplane parts for the 34 airlines that operate in the state of Minnesota. That's $34 million. Do you know how much PCAs could get a raise for $34 million? Do you know how much we could fund our schools for $230 million? These are literal choices before us. And so when you hear House Republicans or Senate Republicans say, we're not going to raise taxes, what they are saying is that Jeff Bezos' data center deserves a tax break and your kids don't deserve free meals in schools. These are the choices that they are saying no to, and they should be asked about that constantly. I think that if the people of Minnesota firmly understand the choices before us, they can put pressure on their Republican members of the legislature to make different choices, and that is what we're talking about here today.
If you guys were to eliminate some of these tax breaks or do a fifth-tier income tax or the social media corporation tax, I mean, if the Congress was to cut Medicaid, I mean, are all of these cuts enough to backfill Medicaid and also deal with the deficit that is looming here, which is what you guys are figuring out right now?
Yeah, so no, these are ideas to help mitigate that, right? What the tax cuts coming from the federal government is going to blow major holes not only in our state budget, but state budgets across the country. And so we do not, as a state, actually no state has enough to fully backfill that. But what we can do with the options in front of us is making sure that we let people know we will mitigate those harms as much as possible. We will try to keep kids fed as much as possible. We will try to make sure people have access to their health care as much as possible. We will try to make sure we keep as many jobs in Minnesota as much as possible. But it will still take all of us working together to push back on our federal government to say this is not what we want, this is not the America we want to live in, and this is not how we want you to treat our states in this country.
So last night, I came across this photograph, 20 individuals believing in a person who said, we all do better when we all do better, and I sent that picture to Emma Greenman, right? That was years ago. The true test, the moral test of society is what Hubert Humphrey said. On your way out, please look at that statute. How do we treat those in the dawning of life and those in the twilight of life, right? To your point, $55 billion comes to the state of Minnesota when you look at Medicaid, when you look at those waivered services. 25 of that is Minnesota's investment, 30 billion of that is the federal investment. What's scary is if that 30 billion disappears, now you go to your service providers and you say you're going to have to do what we expect you to do with half the amount of money that's in your pocket. What do we know about the homeless in Minnesota, right? What's the largest and the fastest growing population of homeless in Minnesota? It's 62 and older, right? It's the elders, right? So if we don't have those safety nets that are in place and we can help adjust that with what we're doing here today, then we're not living up to the true mission and vision of Wellstone or Humphrey. And that's not Minnesota's way. Minnesota's way is to protect those in that dawning and the twilight of life. So thank you for your question.
I want to announced a pair of bills to protect federal workers, but I think those both have sputtered out. The $10,000 for laid off veterans and the
So you're talking about the unemployment insurance and yeah. So we are, I think, again, we have a long journey to the end of session. And right now we are 100 days into this Trump administration. And frankly, some of these layoffs have just happened in the last couple of weeks. And so what we have said is we have to use all the power we have where we have it to protect people. So we are going to be fighting to protect not just those 18,000 federal workers, but what we know, and as we heard right here, is that the blast impact of federal cuts is much broader with Minnesota workers. And so we're working for workers, we're working for families, but we know that their stake, they are our members, they are our neighbors, they are members of our community. And so we're going to fight to ensure that they have the economic security like all workers in Minnesota should. And so we're keeping fighting on that bill.
Confidence that you guys will be able to make all of these compromises with the Republican Party to get this budget done in the next 25 days?
We are going to save Republicans' asses. I just want to say that really clearly. Because what is coming down the pike to Minnesota is absolutely devastating. On July 1st of this year, we will be supposed to get a pot of money for special education, and then districts draw down from that pot of money over the year. What happens if we don't get that special education money? What if they cut off the HUD funding and people lose their Section 8 vouchers? We have 150,000 Minnesotans homeless overnight. Republicans are going to be begging us to help them find solutions because it hits every single district. And so we are coming forward because these are conversations we're having with each other and with the public. We need Minnesotans to know that we are not helpless in the situation, that this doesn't have to happen and we just say, oh, there's nothing we can do. There are things that we can absolutely do. And so basically what we're saying today is we're letting Republicans know, we've been letting them know in committee, we've been letting them know behind closed doors, is that we are here to solve this problem. They could solve this problem by just talking to the administration that would listen to them that never listens to us. But we are going to have real budget solutions for when they cut Medicaid, for when they cut healthcare services, for when they don't send out the special education funding, for when they don't send out the nutrition funding, for when they cut the farm bill, for when the tariffs go on, go off, go on, go off, when the roads and bridges crumble down, when the climate and the wildfires happen, there's no FEMA to help anybody. They are going to be begging us for solutions, and we have them now, thank God. But I don't know if we're going to get to a point where it's like a cute little negotiation over ideologies. It's literally going to be people's lives, and we will need these solutions then.
Is this a May 19th conversation or a special session conversation?
I didn't hear what you said.
Is this a May 19th conversation or a special session?
This is an April 24th conversation. April 25th, we could be in a whole different world.
I want to ask briefly again about one thing Republicans said last night. I mean, they were talking about the tone of the message that the governor gave and how he was focused so much on these federal issues. They said he should be more focused for the moment on what's going on the state right now, and we could save that sort of the Corn's question for a special session. They said that the Medicaid cuts are an untruth, that sort of thing. I mean, what's your response to that sort of rhetoric?
I don't know how somebody could look around at what is happening in our country and say, hey, don't look at that, don't worry about that. Build your budget off of something like we're supposed to be building a budget for 2029 and we do not know what's going to happen on April 29th. I don't know how we could focus on anything else than the authoritarian fascist takeover where we are being told don't use certain words. We are arresting American citizens. We are deporting people without due process to extermination camps in El Salvador. How are we supposed to ignore that? We're supposed to pretend that that doesn't affect Minnesotans. We've had thousands of college kids disappeared. We've had schools lose their library funding. We have kids who won't go to schools because they're afraid that their parents won't be at home when they get there anymore. We could use universal school meals. We could cut Medicaid. We could have seniors homeless. We could have people with disabilities sitting in their beds because nobody is there to get them out of it in the morning. That is a horrifying reality that is here now because of what is happening in the federal government. And they want to pretend like it's not happening. Thank God Governor Walz is focusing on what's happening because the people of Minnesota are calling us every day. They show up at this Capitol every weekend. They show up in the tiny towns and the little cities and the suburbs everywhere to say, please do something. And we are here saying we are.
All right, thank you, everybody. Thank you.